28 million Americans are children of alcoholics. 11 million of them are under the age of 18. Children of addicts are 8 times more likely to develop an addiction. Children of addicted parents experience greater physical and mental health problems with higher health and welfare costs than non-addicted families. 1 to 2/3 of all child maltreatment cases involve some level of alcohol and drug abuse. Children exposed to a parent's drug use is more likely to exhibit behavioral problems at school and at home. 78% of adolescent runaways and homeless youth reported alcohol abuse in their home. Each year, approximately 11,900 infants are abandoned at birth and kept at the hospital. 78% of them are drug exposed.
My dad was usually in jail, and I didn't see him very much, but my mom was usually around. So I never really had a person to, like a father figure. I mean, my grandpa was always there, but we never had like a bond like I would with my dad.
Can you talk about how you knew that your parents were addicts, other than your grandparents telling you about it? What did you see? What did you experience?
They were always, they always had, every time they were around, they would always have like the look. You could tell they were using, and I've seen them more than once used before. I was probably around 8, and I was with my dad. I was spending the weekend with him, and I walked into his room, and he had the needle in his arm, and he just told me it was just medicine and not to tell anybody. And I didn't know at the time. I was just a kid, but now I know now.
Kind of think back to your childhood, what you feel like you missed out with your parents using and you being raised by your grandparents. What do you feel like you missed out on in the typical childhood?
Having going places with mom and dad, and just having family dinners with them, and just spending quality time with both of them together.
I used heroin and I overdosed. My father found me in the hallway, called 911, and the people that came to save my life have known me since I was a little girl. And I remember waking up in the hospital, being very confused and angry and not thankful to anybody for saving my life at this point, only worried about not being high, being sick, if I was gonna go to jail, not wanting to go to treatment, which ended up being the agreement that I go to treatment the next morning and I wouldn't have to go to jail. So I then went home from the hospital and I told my parents I was getting in the shower, and the police did not find my heroin. So I shot up again, and I was dead in the bathroom, and my father had to bust the bathroom door in and give me CPR at this point and call the paramedics again. I had about 9 shots of Narcan this day. They took me back to the hospital, and the only thing I can really remember is being so angry as to why I didn't die. At this point in my life, I'd let my addiction take me to the point where I didn't care. I didn't care who I hurt. I didn't care who was affected. I didn't care if my 13-year-old son had a mother.
It makes me feel sad, but at the same time, I know what she's been going through, and I'm proud of how she's came out of her old ways of using it and now to the clean life.
How do you think your mom feels now about living and dying?
I think that she's grateful to be alive, and that she wants to stay.
How's your relationship with mom now?
Good. It's the greatest it's ever been.
Christy, how old were you when you had Tillman?
I was I was 17 when I got pregnant, and I was 18 when I had him.
Tell me about your pregnancy with Tillman.
I did not know I was pregnant with Tillman at first, and I was still using drugs. I was using drugs like cocaine and ecstasy, and taking pills. And then I found out I was pregnant with him, and I stopped for the rest of my pregnancy.
So he was born okay?
He was born perfect. Absolutely perfect. I did pretty much pick up right where I left off after having Tillman, with drinking and using.
With Tillman growing up and both of his parents being addicts, where do you see your family's future?
You know, me and Tillman have always been really close, and like I said, having him so young and being basically a child myself, we have not always had the typical mother-son relationship. It's kind of more like brother-sister, but I plan to always be close with Tillman, and he's my baby, and he's my reason. He's everything to me. I mean, the one person in the world that I know will always have my back. I just want to thank you for never giving up and never losing hope and always being the kid that you are and always being my baby.
Are you worried about his future with drugs?
Yeah, it concerns me. He's got some really crazy genes when it comes to being an addict, and it concerns me. I 110% believe that if my son picks up, it's probably gonna happen. And I just don't ever want him to go through what I went through. And I mean, yes, of course, like the physical part of it and stuff like that, but you know, being incarcerated, being in rehab, and just being alone. And you know, I found out Mommy can't save me when you get locked up, and just that feeling, just feeling worthless and like a loser, and like you want to die. No, I don't ever want my son to feel that way.
Do you go to therapy?
I go to the school counselor every week just for checkups, just to make sure everything's going good. And then I go to a out-of-school counselor, usually once a month. It helps a lot.
I have used drugs on and off since I was 14. I started using heroin when I was 19, and I was never Narcaned until right before I got clean. I thought that I could use a little bit and see how strong it was and then use more, but I apparently had gotten my hands on fentanyl. That day I overdosed twice.
Do you ever think that you would live with Mom and Dad? Or did you ever hold out hope when you were little that you would live with one of them?
No, I've always kind of wanted to live with Nana and Papa. That's just the best place for me to live, because you never know if they could go back to using, but I know if I'm with my Nana and Papa living there, that I'll always be safe no matter what. So,
If your parents relapsed, would you give them another chance?
yeah, I would always give my parents more chances, as many chances as they need.
So I'm in recovery from addiction, primarily heroin addiction. I've been in recovery for 5.5 years now. But my addiction started way before the thought of Chloe ever came about. I was actually her age when I was diagnosed as an addict, and just continued to party and continued to advance in stronger drugs more often, more severe disorder. And I got pregnant with her when I was 20, and I used throughout most of the pregnancy. The first couple of months were different substances, methamphetamine, crack, pills. There came a time when I was about 3 months pregnant with her that I knew that I needed to get help and I needed to make a change so that I could have a healthy baby. And I called my dad. and I asked him to come and get me. And I did really well for a few months. And then I was diagnosed with a really bad kidney infection, and I was hospitalized. And while I was hospitalized, pregnant with her, they gave me IV pain medicine every few hours. And that's when the feeling and the knowledge of what pain medicine intravenously felt like. I know that when I was delivering her, I even stopped pushing while waiting for them to give me more IV pain medicine. Thankfully, she was born healthy. She weighed 5 pounds and 12 ounces, so she was a little small, but she was super strong, very, very tough, as she is now. But, you know, unfortunately, the beauty of motherhood and the beauty of this beautiful young lady wasn't enough for me to stop using at that time. So for the first 6 weeks, I wasn't working, so I was being a good mom. It was me primarily with all of her care. Of course, I lived at my parents' home, so they were there constantly. She slept in a bassinet next to my bed. You know, I was her primary caregiver. And then when she was around 6 or 7 weeks old, I got a good job. And so I was working full time. She stayed home with my parents, and they kept her since they were retired. And once I started getting a few paychecks in and kind of started getting lonely, I started going out to the bars at night and would come home that night, but within a month or so, it would be not coming home at all. And then, you know, soon after that, it was not coming home for the entire weekend. And when that became a pattern, my parents approached me about letting them take over and me signing my rights away. And in active addiction, I resented him for that, because in my thought, I could take care of her. In my mind, I was her mother. How dare you think that you can take her away from me and do a better job? But deep down inside, I knew it was for the best. I knew that I couldn't take care of her. I knew that I wasn't being the mother that she deserved. And I knew that the best thing for her would be for me to sign my rights away. As hard as it was, the hardest thing I've ever done, I knew it was in her best interest. Shortly after, my parents decided it wasn't healthy for me to live in the home any longer, and my dad rented an apartment for me just a few miles away in Blanchester. But it didn't take long for me to figure out who were the biggest drug dealers in town. And I got involved with some serious people that were cooking and manufacturing methamphetamine. And I got involved with that really quickly. I can remember on her first birthday, I had been awake for about 2 weeks on methamphetamine. And I got to the house for her birthday party, and I was hallucinating because of the methamphetamine and being awake for so many days. And I didn't stay long, and I left. And I think it was several weeks before I even came back just to visit. When I would visit, the guilt and the shame would take over. So I would leave and I would go and use.
What do you think, like, how do you think your life would have been different if Amy would have kept you?
If she kept me, it would have been hell on earth. I could have walked in on her overdosing. I could have walked in on her just getting high. It would have taken away my innocence too early.
What happened that made you, like, realize that she was your mom? How did you find that out?
We were in this parking lot, and to pick me up to go to my grandma's, and I was just calling her Amy because I didn't know any better, and she was like, "Hey, stop, I'm your mom, call me mom." So, and I was like, "Oh, she's my mom."
I know now, looking back, that was a really selfish thing for me to do, to tell this young lady when she was a child, I'm your mother, but yet where have I been? And for a little girl, I can't imagine what went through your mind. One of the hardest things that I still go through is when I look through photos of Chloe growing up. I'm not in these photos, and I don't remember these photos being taken because I wasn't there. I think my biggest regret is just that time that I can't get back. The biggest regret is that time that I missed watching you grow up, watching you take your first steps, watching you learn how to ride a bike, helping you with your homework. It wasn't fair to you, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life.
Recovery, there is a hope, and I believe in recovery, and it's great that she's going into it. She's completely turned her life around, and I'm proud of her.
But yeah, I do. I think she understands that all of the hard work that I've put into my recovery is largely because of her, because I wanted to show her that she deserves me at my best, and that I'm sorry that, you didn't get that for most of your life, but I'm here now, and I can't change anything that happened, but everything I do today is to ensure that none of that ever happens again. And if all of that pain and darkness was just so that she didn't go down that same path, maybe it was worth it to make sure that she lives a happy and healthy life as an adult and has a successful life, Our kids are worth it. This life is really hard, and it's hard to come out of. And when you come out of it, the guilt and the shame is still going to be there, but the drugs won't be there to help you escape. And that's where the therapy comes in. That's where the treatment comes in. And it's worth it. These kids need you. You have to step up and you have to be a parent. You have to do whatever it takes to get better and get past this. I can't imagine where my life would be if I didn't change so that I could show her that my life means that much to me, that she means that much to me, that I changed every single thing about myself so that I could be someone that she could be proud of. And I think it's important that other kids know that they're not alone and that it's okay to be upset and it's okay to be resentful, but we just have to love each other through it, and we have to keep trying.
So what can we do? Demand drug education in schools? Kids are using drugs, and nearly every teenager knows someone who's abusing an illegal substance. What we can hold on to is that people do recover. Nobody's a lost cause. We need to offer love, support, kindness, forgiveness, and help.